right. Well, hey, y'all. Welcome to this edition of History and Highballs. We're so glad that you're joining us for this evening's program, History and Highballs Meshuggah. My name is Stacy, and I handle adult education over here at the museum. So whenever you join us for one of these History and Highballs programs, you and I will get to virtually spend the evening together, listening to some incredible stories about North Carolina places and people and what makes our state so special. Tonight's program is just one of many exciting virtual offerings available through MOH. So if you'd like to learn more about our History at Home initiative, head on over to the museum's website at www.ncmuseumofhistory.org. This is also where you can learn more about shopping at our awesome museum shop, as well as joining the North Carolina Museum of History Associates. Our associates and foundation provide crucial funding and support to the museum, which in addition to many other things, helps make programming like this evening's program happen. We would like to thank those of you who donated funds towards this evening's program. We do our best to keep our programming free to attend, but there are costs associated with keeping our series going. And we just continue to be so appreciative and humbled by your generous support of the museum and its programs. A few quick housekeeping items for this evening. We ask that you please keep your mics muted throughout the entirety of the event, and to please type any questions that you have for our guest speaker into the chat function located at the bottom center of your screen. At the end of the program, I will ask our speaker as many of your questions as time allows. All right, so it is my honor to introduce this evening's speaker, Rob Clement. Rob is head mensch and founder of the upstart Jewish deli and bakery in Charlotte, North Carolina, Meshuggah. He is inspired daily by his amazing wife, Frankie, and beautiful children. Help me out here, Rob. Calliope?
Calliope. Calliope and Oscar. Yeah.
And Oscar. He started Meshuggah as a pop-up deli in September of 2020. Since joining forces with pastry chef Hannah
Wusiker.
All right. Rob and Meshuggah have been sought out with extreme demand while gaining exposure from such publications as Southern Living. The team behind Meshuggah is currently the fundraising phase of opening their first brick and mortar operation. Meshuggah's modern Jewish interpretation of food is designed to create a gathering place which pays homage to the history of Jewish culture through food. While utilizing the food style of the Jewish American delicatessen and bakery, they strive to represent the entire Jewish diaspora. Sandwiches, pastries, and more draw inspiration from cuisines of the world, including the one most relevant to them, Southern American cuisine. Tonight, Rob will be presenting with a focus on Jewish food culture here in North Carolina through history and into the future. Okay, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
All righty. Thank you very much for that, Stacy. Thanks for having me. So I'm Rob Clement. That was a pretty great introduction. Happy to be here. A little bit about myself and Meshuggah. We started back in September as a pop-up, as Stacy said. My wife and I were making pastrami and black and white cookies and pickles, and that was about it. We started by selling 16 sandwiches at a brewery. I left my job in the midst of 2020 being 2020, and we kind of just caught fire. And then we brought on Hannah, who's our pastry chef. You'll see some of her stuff through the presentation tonight. And when that happened, we kind of took off, and we've hit a phase where it's time to start getting ready to open a restaurant. One of the great things about doing this is we've really had a great opportunity to talk about Jewish culture. It's something, being in the South, being in North Carolina, we feel that although there are a lot of us here, there may not be a lot of cultural representation in the mainstream cultural aspects of our cities and towns throughout North Carolina. So without any more wasting of time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Forgive me, I was not good in school. I dropped out a bunch of times, ended up being a chef. So I am going to, excuse me, I'm going to share my screen. And excuse me for 1 second. You can see my beautiful family. Okay, Jewish culture in North Carolina, past, present, and future. So we're going to take a little shallow dive into the food that shaped Jewish culture in North Carolina throughout history. I say a shallow dive because it is a very vast Jewish culture, and it goes way far back. A lot of people don't realize. Excuse me, not good at that thing. A lot of people don't realize. We're going backwards. I apologize. A lot of people don't realize that Jews have been here for a long time. But before we get into the history, we're going to give you a little cocktail recipe. This is History and Highballs. So my brother, Brad, he is one of the managers at the Spotted Cat Music Club, which is also in the South. So in New Orleans, Louisiana. And he made us an awesome cocktail recipe. So right there, marshmallow twist. So we can share this after the fact and you can be able to see it. Marshmallow twist is a take on what you would see at Passover when you get those little marshmallow candies. He basically made a drink that is representative of those flavors. So he wrote Jewish cold brew. We apologize. I didn't catch that, but it's actually Hebrew cold brew. So we have been working with a coffee company that's out of Raleigh, North Carolina. They brew kosher coffee, and it is called Hebrew. So back to the history stuff. Jews in colonial North Carolina. So a lot of people have a misrepresentation that most Jews got here within the last 100 to 200 years. But in reality, in the South, we've had people here. A gentleman named Joachim Gans is the first noted Jew to arrive in North Carolina. He was a native of Prague. He came all the way back in 1585. Everybody's familiar with John Locke, especially if you've watched Hamilton and seen and read about all the papers from leading up into the Revolutionary War. John Locke's fundamental constitutions of 1669 opened the Carolinas to Jews, heathens, and dissenters. So we know that anti-Semitism is a pretty big thing throughout the world. Jews tend to move around and migrate throughout history. That is no different here in the Americas. The picture you see in this slide is a picture of a Hebrew temple in Durham, North Carolina from back in, not colonial times, but back in the times of like the Model T. Can't really find pictures of temples, but I will say here in Charlotte, the Hebrew cemetery dates back as far as the 1800s. So we do have a vast history in the Carolinas. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Apologize. Again, I'm not very good at these PowerPoint presentations. I apologize. Jews in the transatlantic slave trade. Did Jews really own slaves, and how did this affect cuisine? So when you talk about Jewish food in the South, it's kind of impossible to really grasp what that means. When it came to coming to North Carolina specifically, you had about 30% of the population of Jews did own slaves. However, there weren't many Jews here. So it is something that there's a lot of misinformation about that, but there's also a lack of information about how food and culture intersected from slavery times and the folks who were actually cooking the food that Jews ate when they came to America. You have upholding kashrut laws and things of that nature. Oftentimes you would have slaves and then eventually servants who would actually be responsible for upholding these laws. And what happened is as people who were brought here, brought their own ingredients from their own countries and own continents, they would impart those flavors into the food of these Jewish slave owners. And what would happen is you'd have this amalgamation of traditionally Jewish, oftentimes Ashkenazi Jewish foods that were brought into the flavors that were brought in were from things like places like Africa, the Caribbean, and the like. So it created this cuisine that is almost impossible to really pinpoint. Jewish and Black food historian Michael Twitty, he has done an amazing job. He's actually one of my he's someone who inspires me every day as far as understanding this cuisine. He has done a lot of work. He has a book coming out called Kosher Soul, which I can't wait to read, where he kind of dives into this topic. And it's something that like I said, there isn't a lot of research on it. There isn't a lot of understanding of it, but one can assume that the intersection of Southern cuisine and Jewish cuisine is quite prevalent. You look at things like matzo ball soup. If you want to talk about matzo ball soup, it's very similar to chicken and dumplings. It's just a thinner broth and a lighter dumpling. You look at something like noodle kugel. That's very similar to a baked mac and cheese, which is very prevalent in the South. So going forward and past the slavery times and into the 1900s, you had in North Carolina, there's quite a few delicatessens that existed here. You had Tenner's here in Charlotte, Lee's, Fines, both in Greensboro, Rose's Delicatessen in Fayetteville, Marcus Famous Delicatessen in Raleigh. And it would appear that the terminology kosher style, again, when you talk about history and things like this, it's very difficult to really pinpoint these things, but the term kosher style, where you wouldn't mix meat and dairy and you wouldn't use treif, meaning pork and shellfish, may or may not have originated in North Carolina, which is interesting. As we're building our restaurant group, we have really embraced that thought process of kosher style, understanding that the reason that kosher style became prevalent is because the access to kosher meat was very difficult back in the 1900s. Obviously, you did not have the supply chain that we have today. So it was very difficult for folks to access kosher meat on a regular basis. If you lived in a small town, a rural small town, and there was no rabbi to kosher your meats, well, then you couldn't get kosher meat. This is kind of the way things were back then. So there were a few delicatessens. Most of them were kosher style. Some were kosher. And those places were frequented by Jews and non-Jews alike. As we move forward into Jewish food today, things are pretty interesting. So right there, you see a picture of our wonderful pastry chef, Hannah Uziker, icing our black and white cookies. So when we started our pop-up here in North Carolina, in Charlotte, there really wasn't a lot of food that represented Jewish culture. And while there was some places that have been around forever, oftentimes what you would find that they have almost been, the term I like to use is Christianized, where you would find things like bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel. And that became what was served at a quote unquote Jewish delicatessen or Jewish bagel shop. Things assimilated a lot to American culture, and there hasn't been a ton of people who have really just embraced the true roots of this cuisine and where it comes from. The interesting part about where we are going with Meshuggah is that we have created an environment where we are not only looking at the popular Jewish foods like black and white cookies, pastrami sandwiches, and the like, but we're diving into cuisines and cultures that are part of the whole Jewish diaspora. So with Jews being from the ancient times being spread throughout the world, we have a situation where Jewish food doesn't really have one specific cuisine that it entails. Jewish food entails a global cuisine that is imparted on by the time and the place that it is in. So being in the South, being where we are, we focus on using local ingredients to create versions of Jewish food. For instance, we have done things like a beet kugel, where we're using local beets and we're making beautiful beets. We do things like when Hannah is making rugula and hamantaschen. We intersect local produce by doing strawberries and apples when those are in season. And that's really the way we want to pay homage to our ancestors and the people who came before us, because if you really dive into what Jewish food is, it is food that is in a lot of ways based around survival. People used what they had available and they made use of every single part of animals and produce. When you look at something like pastrami, for instance, while it is delicious, it is rooted in preservation. It comes from a time before refrigeration. So they salt cured the meat and they smoked the meat to make it last longer. What they ended up coming up with was delicious sandwich fodder. When you look at things like pickles, same idea. Pickles are a form of preserving cucumbers. If you've ever grown cucumbers, you know that once they start coming over and over and over again. You can have a multitude of cucumbers from a plant. And how do you use those all? You can only have so much cucumber salad. So we have pickles. An interesting thing about pickles is back in Eastern Europe, I don't know that this necessarily happened here in the United States, but in Eastern Europe, they would take pickle barrels, and in the winter, as right before lakes would freeze over, they'd actually throw these barrels into the water and allow the water to freeze over and then preserve them in there and kind of create mini refrigeration units. Well, large refrigeration units. So again, here we have a look at some of Hannah's pastries. When we talk about Jewish food today, it's something that we're still discovering ourselves, where it's been, where it can go, and how we can be a part of that. So Jewish food of the future, what that's all about is really intersecting, again, time and place. So that picture you see there on the screen is one of our pimento cheese knishes. So trying to intersect Southern cuisine with Jewish cuisine is something that we try to do on an almost daily basis. We don't believe that just making a potato knish is representative of where we are. While we can get great potatoes and we can get great, we can make a beautiful pastry dough. To us, it relates to people who haven't grown up with this cuisine by bringing in flavor profiles that they're used to, while omitting things that are so prevalent in North Carolina cuisine, such as pork and shellfish. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to go off of the screen share. I apologize. Sorry, I'm not great at the screen share. There we go. Okay. So with that, what I'll say is beyond that, what we also are looking at is different ways to feed people who generally do not have access to Jewish cuisine as they know it. So we have a lot of folks who are vegan and vegetarian. Predominantly Jewish cuisine is something that is mostly meat forward, if not dairy forward. It's one or the other. You do have parve cuisine, which is kind of down the middle. It does not have meat nor dairy. And that is something that we have looked a lot into, and how we can bring that to the table and make things a bit more palpable for people who do not eat certain ways. As we know, food culture in America has changed quite a bit. We have a lot of people eating a lot of different ways, and how can we create food that is available for anybody? We strive to not only feed Jewish people, but we really want to feed people who are outside of our culture and expose them to these foods that we grew up with and we love, and find a way to kind of bridge the gap between food that we know and food that others know. And that's really a big part of what we're all about. No, my computer is not plugged in. Anyways, so I'll be completely transparent with you guys. I went really fast. I'm very, I guess it's kind of nerve wracking with no one being here. So Stacy, I don't know if we could go into questions. I'd love to answer some questions. That's kind of my strong suit, to be honest with you.
That's okay. Yeah, absolutely. So we have one from Nils. He says, "Hi, we live in Greensboro, North Carolina, and have found it absolutely impossible to find a really delicious," I'm gonna not pronounce this correctly, challah.
Challah. Yeah.
Challah. Okay.
So
challah.
Yeah.
Just impossible. All their Lowe's, Harris Teeter, and the other Lowe's have challahs. They are all tasteless. Or you could say they taste like cardboard. We were originally from the San Francisco area, where there are a ton of great bakeries and lots of great challah to be had. What do we do?
Well, I can say this. We I can't talk about Greensboro. We're not in Greensboro, unfortunately. We, with one of the things we hope to do with what we're doing in opening Meshuggah is that we believe that by opening one truly Jewish restaurant here in Charlotte, that perhaps there's a lot of us everywhere. Like you're in Greensboro. I'm sure there's cooks in Greensboro who would love to cook the food that they grew up with. A lot of people, why we called ourselves Meshuggah is exactly Yiddish. It's Yiddish for crazy. So the reason we called it Meshuggah is when I started talking to people about this idea of opening this Jewish concept in North Carolina, everybody said I was crazy. They said, there's no way this works. There's no way this is going to happen. There's not enough Jews to support it. In reality, not only are there a lot of Jews who want to support such a concept, but we don't pull the crowd at our pop-ups, but I would venture to say that at least half of our crowds are not Jewish and have in a lot of ways have never been exposed to Jewish cuisine. The thing that people don't really understand about North Carolina is we are a state full of transplants. There's tons of people from up north. North Carolina is full of New Yorkers. It's full of Chicago. I don't even know how to say Chicagoans.
Yes.
It's also full of Floridians like myself and my wife who end up coming up. And we come from places that are full of Jewish cuisine. And whether you're Jewish or not, you may or may not have been exposed to it. So I think hopefully our hope is that, well, obviously we hope to expand outside of Charlotte. But even if we don't expand outside of Charlotte, we hope that the success we've found and the success we hope to continue to find will show people that, this food has legs here in the South. It's something that we really are passionate about, because I'll be honest with you, through 2020, part of how this happened is for myself and our family. This food is our comfort food. Like matzo ball soup is like what we go to when things aren't going great, and there's nowhere to go get it. So we started making our own matzo ball soup at the house, started making our own challah, started making our own pickles. I started making pastrami because that's what we wanted to eat. It's like your way of dealing with stuff. And finally, a friend of ours their dog had to be put down, and we brought them some food, and they were like, "You should be selling this. Why have you been cooking other stuff?" So, this is comfort food for us, and we plan to kind of make it more mainstream. And that's really our big goal with what we're doing, for sure.
That's awesome. Beverly asks, did you mention incorporating pork and shellfish?
No, so I'm sorry if that got confusing. We do not incorporate pork and shellfish. So we operate as a kosher style establishment at this point. So what that means is to this point, we have never made anything that had both meat and dairy in it. We work really hard to keep those things separate. We actually just had a conversation about this today, and like where we go from here if we stick to this. And for us, it's like it's a multifaceted thing why we don't incorporate pork and shellfish and mix meat and dairy. To be completely honest, I do not keep kosher. I'm not a kosher Jew. I am a practicing Jew. However, I don't keep kosher. I do eat pork. I do eat shellfish. But I believe that if I were to open a Jewish food establishment and my grandparents, my aunts and uncles found out that I was mixing meat and dairy and doing things with shellfish and pork, they would be very upset. So honestly, for the sake of my ancestors, there's no way we're ever throwing shellfish or pork into anything we do. It's not us. And I've told people this in the past, like one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I don't want, not to say it's wrong to eat it, but I don't believe that the food of our culture should be appropriated to become where a bacon, egg, and cheese bagel becomes synonymous with Jewish cuisine. I don't think that's necessarily respectful to the people who came here in many ways fleeing for their safety, and that's how they ended up here. And when you have places like Dunkin' Donuts and Einstein Bagels selling bacon cheddar bagels, it makes people who don't understand our culture have a misrepresentation of what our culture is really all about.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Meshuggah is Yiddish for crazy. Did you take that name because of starting in 2020 or because you're melding North Carolina taste into Jewish cuisine?
So there's a lot to it. As I said, it was partially originally the intention was kind of a I'll show you like you don't think we can open a Jewish establishment in North Carolina? Well, we'll just call it crazy just to be funny. But then it's kind of become this thing that's almost like a mission statement of ours to like do things in a counterintuitive way. And that goes from not just to the way we do our food and incorporating Southern ingredients into Jewish food, but it also goes into the way we operate and the way we staff our restaurant, the way we pay people, and the way everything we do is we try to figure out what is the best way to do it and what is the most sustainable way to do it. And that goes beyond food. It goes to the way we treat our people that work with us and the way we grow as a business and grow as a company. And we really, if it doesn't sound crazy to someone, you're probably not going to make any waves. So the way we look at it is, you know, if it's not something that we need to at least talk about and figure out if it actually is crazy, then we're not working hard enough to be trendsetters. We don't want to follow trends. We want to make them.
Absolutely. You're going to have to help me out with this next question from Adrian. Yeah. Do you have any Sephardic? Is that?
So yeah, Sephardic.
Sephardic or only Ashkenazi?
So for instance, that's a great question. Thank you for that. It's something, again, it's something that we're really passionate about. We really want to explore the entire Jewish diaspora, and that goes beyond just Ashkenazi cuisine. So if anybody doesn't know, Ashkenazi cuisine is predominantly refers to Eastern European cuisine, Russia, Poland, Austria, that part of the world, and those folks coming over here. Things like gefilte fish, things like babka. Those are very Ashkenazi foods. When you talk about Sephardic cuisine, you're talking about Latin American, South American countries. You're also talking about parts of the Mediterranean. You're talking about Israel. Like these are more Sephardic cultures. Like I said earlier, the beauty of Judaism and Jewish food is that there is no one type of Jewish food. For someone to say that matzo ball soup is more Jewish than kifta bilhaut, which is something we did at a Easter Sunday pop-up. We made it's basically a Libyan Italian dish, which is a tomato stew with these fish meatballs. So during Passover, everyone's used to like the Ashkenazi, like gefilte fish. We found a dish that was like the Sephardic version of that, and we sold it. It was actually the thing we sold the most of on Easter, which was really surprising. So the short answer is we 100% are going to embrace Sephardic food. We're actually working on a thing for Shabbat. We're going to do Shabbat dinners on Friday nights. We are a deli, so we're predominantly going to be open during the day, breakfast and lunch. But when we open up, we're going to be offering these take-home Shabbat dinners. And what we want to do with those is we want to have it be each week that we do a Shabbat dinner, we theme it towards a specific culture within Judaism. So whether that be a Roman Jewish Shabbat dinner, whether it be a New Orleans Jewish Shabbat dinner, whether it be a Ethiopian Jewish Shabbat dinner, there's so many places where Jews exist and have created foodways that are based around what's available to them. And that's really exciting for us, especially in a place here where there's so much transient food that ended up in North Carolina.
And so many foodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who love to try cuisines from all different cultures.
There you go.
So this next question, kind of a question. It says, I know you've done video cooking classes. Is it possible, do you have any plans for Hannah to do one on making challah?
Yeah, we've actually, we've talked a lot about doing some virtual cooking classes. You know, it's something we kind of need to figure out how to have the best technology. When I was doing Jewish cooking classes a while back and just regular cooking classes earlier in the year, you know, we didn't have quite the following we have. And so it becomes a little tricky to get everything nailed down and make it streamlined. As you can tell from my presentation, I'm not the most tech savvy person on the planet. So luckily we have a team of people who are working with us now who are more tech savvy than me. I probably should have had them help me with the PowerPoint. They're probably going to yell at me later. But Yeah, so definitely, you know, Hannah is an amazing pastry chef. She has so much talent and so much ability, and she's really passionate about this food. And for us, we really want to afford her with opportunities to kind of spread her wings and show people what she does and what she's all about. Her challah is unreal. She's been making these challahs at one of the local temples here, and it's been coming out like beautiful, beautiful challah. And so yes, short answer, yes, we are going to get into cooking classes. It's just a little bit out of the way. It's not, I can't give you an exact date, but it will come down the pike soon.
Awesome. Adrian asks, can you tell us more about modern Jewish items that you're creating?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we made, which has really kind of taken off, was we actually make a vegan pastrami. So a lot of people, you know, meat alternatives generally are made from alternative proteins. But what we actually do is we take celery root, which is just a vegetable, celeriac, some people call it, and we turn it into pastrami. So we braise it, excuse me, we braise it, we smoke it. We braise it actually in a beet juice braising liquid. So we use beet juice to give it that pink color that pastrami would have. And then we use the same exact seasonings that we would use on our pastrami. So the same exact rub, and we rub that out on the outside of the pastrami, and then we smoke it. So you end up with this thing that is very reminiscent in both texture and in flavor to pastrami. And then we don't, again, I said we do kosher style, so we don't mix meat and dairy. So people come and they want a Reuben. What we offer is a vegan Reuben. So it's made with vegetables, and we use a plant-based cheese. So that's like one way that we're intersecting like a modern approach to Jewish cuisine. And another thing is like things like I have history of working. So my brother, as I showed, was he works at the Spotted Cat in New Orleans. At one point, I was living down there with and we had a restaurant together. And we actually, you know, I learned how to make gumbo. It's something I had never really eaten until I lived down there. I learned how to make it. I love it. I learned from people who are from the Bayou, and they're very particular. The first time I tried to make it, they had no idea what I was doing. They laughed at me. They said, "This is not gumbo, sir." And so they taught me how to do it right. We've done matzo ball gumbo. So that's actually, I'll show you right here. So one of the places I like looked at for research. So Marcy Cohen Ferris wrote this book. It's called Matzo Ball Gumbo. It's about it says culinary tales of the Jewish South. A lot of it is based in the New Orleans area, based in the Bayou and like the Mississippi Delta. So like that is something that's not abnormal in certain parts of the country. You figure there's a lot of ways that, like I said, Jewish food is a lot to do with time and place. It's a lot about where you are and what you have available. So when we made our pastrami or our matzo ball gumbo, what we made, instead of using andouille sausage, which is a pork sausage, or using shellfish, what we did was we took the burnt ends of the pastrami, used that as the meat in in our gumbo, and then added smoked chicken in it to give it that smoky flavor that you would get from andouille sausage. So it's kind of things like that, and figuring out how to make things very like new, just make new versions of what Jewish food can be. Because we don't feel like there is one definition for what Jewish food is, and we kind of want to create our own definition.
Absolutely. So Judy has a question. Cheesecake this weekend. Do you all ship?
Yeah. So Hannah is doing cheesecake. We're actually, that brings up an awesome event we're doing on Sunday. So Shavuot starts Sunday evening. So we are doing a Shavuot event at a local farm called Nebedeh Farms. Again, talking about how the intersection of slavery and Judaism earlier in the presentation. The farmer who runs that farm, he's a Black farmer, and one of his missions is to bring indigenous crops from Africa to the Carolinas, the same way that happened 400 years ago. And he is actively planting these crops and growing these crops and cultivating these crops. And so we're going out there and we're using some of these crops to make like delicious food. And it's really cool because like talking about like the Jewish diaspora, there's Jews in Africa and they use what they have available to them there. And so there's no reason that I see that we shouldn't use the crops that are available to us here. So when we're doing that event, Hannah is making cheesecake. She's making a delicious strawberry mascarpone cheesecake. Shavuot is based a lot around indulging with dairy items. So we're going to have those pimento cheese knishes available. We're going to be doing the cheesecake. Not necessarily related to dairy, but we're doing some really delicious tomato sandwiches because it's summer. Like, it's about to be summer. Tomatoes are about to be available. I'm sorry, my kids are going crazy. They want to be on summer. Careful. So yeah. Thank you for that question.
So if we have the opportunity to attend one of your pop-ups, what should we order? What's your favorite meal?
Man, it's a loaded question. I mean, we do have people who come and they just order everything. I mean, to be honest with you, yeah, it's great for us when that happens. But I'd say when we do our pop-ups, depending on what the pop-up is, we have probably five savory items and 5 sweet is generally, it's within that range, like 3 to 5 on both sides. I'd say if you're talking about the fan favorites, because what my favorites are and what everybody else's favorites are might not be the same. I believe that the pastrami sandwich is probably the favorite thing of everybody. If you ask me, we make a tongue sandwich, which when we open will be called the mensch. So I call myself the head mensch. If you don't know what mensch means, it just means someone who's just a good guy and looking out, like trying to do good things. And so my favorite thing, two foods to eat in Jewish cuisine, the stuff that it's kind of bizarre that it's my favorite stuff. I've liked it since I was a little kid is pickled tongue and chopped liver. And so we've made a sandwich that has pickled tongue and chopped liver and a schmaltz aioli on it. And it comes on what's called Borodinsky. It's a Russian rye bread, and that's made by our friends at Verdant Bread. They're a great local bakery who does things the right way. And that's my favorite thing. From on the sweet side, the black and white cookies are always a hit, but I'll tell you, Hannah makes the best rugula I've ever had. And I've eaten a lot of rugula. I like rugula. Hers is really good. It's really, really good. And she makes this apricot one that we did with these Turkish apricots. Man, it's incredible. So I'd say you got to just order a bunch of it, try it, do the big picture overhead with all the things, and then share it on social media, tell all your friends. That's the best way to order, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. Julian asks, if you were in the Raleigh-Durham area, where's a good Jewish bakery, bagelry, deli? Also, any good kosher grocers in this area that you know of, missing this cuisine that we could get in New York?
So I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with the Raleigh area. I do know in terms of kosher, I couldn't give you an honest answer. If you're looking for kosher establishments, I do know in the Raleigh area, there is a deli. It's called Ish Delicatessen that should be opening soon. I've talked to those folks on social media. They're not exclusively a Jewish deli. They're kind of embracing like delicatessens from multiple cultures. So like Jewish, Italian deli, all those kind of things. So I would be on the lookout for them if you're not keeping kosher. If you do keep kosher, I can get back to you and give you some answers. If you want to email me, it's rob@mashugana.com. I'll find it for you. But in terms of a kosher grocer, there's actually one here in Charlotte called Gleiberman's Gourmet. Gleiberman's Gourmet. They used to have a deli. They moved locations. Unfortunately, after their landlord didn't really give them a choice, they had to move, and they moved to a new location. So now they're just a kosher grocer. And so like when we do kosher catering events, we get our meat through Jeff over at Gleiberman's. I know they ship pretty much everything they do. It's actually a pretty crazy operation. They service all the kosher inmates for the Georgia State prisons. They do all the kosher products for Duke University, who actually has one of the biggest Jewish studies programs in America. It's actually the first. It was the first one in North Carolina. The Jewish studies program over there is at Duke, and it's a pretty vibrant, thriving Jewish community that goes to Duke University. and they provide them with all their product as well.
Awesome. Lots of questions about, do you ship your foods to people?
So that's a great, we are still in the figuring out of those logistics. Trust me, I would love to ship all over the country. The real issue is honestly logistics and making sure that we're able to charge a reasonable price for our stuff. Shipping is not cheap. It's something we're trying to figure out. I promise that it is in the pipeline. It's going to be a lot easier for us to do that once we open our restaurant, because we'll have a bigger facility where we can produce a lot more food in a shorter amount of time. So our target date for opening is October of this year. So I would be on the lookout, probably early 2022. All things go well, then we should probably get at least some of our products. It'll probably start with some of Hannah's products, because honestly, baked goods are a little bit easier to ship than pastrami sandwiches. We'll figure that out eventually. Yeah, we'll figure that out eventually. But I mean, this is part of why we wanted to open, because when you talk about Jewish cuisine, these Jewish delis become like institutions in their cities. So if you look at in New York, you have like Katz's, Second Avenue Deli, Russian Daughters, places like that. You have Bread's Bakery. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yonah Schimmel for knishes, a million places for bagels. If you go to Chicago, you have Manny's. If you go to LA, you have Langer's. If you go to Houston, you have Kenny and Ziggy's. And like all these places become basically tourist destinations. Jews in places that are underserved from a culinary aspect, will travel to go to these places and visit cities that otherwise they might not. And so we don't see a reason why Charlotte can't become one of those cities where people from all over North Carolina, I mean, let's face it, even if you're coming from Wilmington, it's a 4-hour drive. Charlotte's got a lot to do. They say here, their whole thing for the tourism is Charlotte's got a lot. So we bring in some Jewish deli food, and then next year you got a reason to come travel over to Charlotte. You can see what we're doing. Who knows? Maybe one day the North Carolina Museum of History will be hosting a Jewish pop-up. And if you live over there, you'll be doing one over there, and you can come get food closer to that side of the state.
Sounds like a plan to me. I'm on board. How do we find your pop-ups? And can you explain to everybody what a pop-up actually is for you guys?
Absolutely. So what a pop-up is. So in September, when we did the first pop-up, it's something that's very new to Charlotte. It happens a lot in bigger cities. And what it is what it usually is like a testing of a concept. So as a chef, you want to do your own thing. You want to open your own restaurant. And it's a big financial commitment to do that. So sometimes the best way to build on a concept and an idea that you have is to try it. And it's hard to commit long-term before you know if a concept is viable in the place you're at. For us, it was out of necessity. I mean, I was unemployed and my wife was unemployed, and we wanted to make a little bit of money. I cook. The brewery, Free Range Brewing here in Charlotte, was looking for people to do pop-ups. They reached out to us and said, hey, we need pop-ups. Are you interested in doing one? They didn't care what I was cooking. I asked, can I do Jewish food? They said, what do you mean? And I said, pastrami sandwiches, pickles, and matzo ball soup. They said, sure, come on down. And so we did that. And what it is basically, so at that point, honestly, I was cooking out of my house. That's what we did. We sold 16 sandwiches that first one. At this point, we show up. We have a commissary kitchen that we rent out. It's called Gracious Kitchen. It's a small community-based commissary kitchen. We rent space out of there, and we'll cook our food in that location. And then we actually have, with the health department, we have a catering license where we transfer our food to another facility to sell it. And there's certain restrictions and requirements that you have to do things a certain way. But it's something that's becoming more and more prominent in Charlotte for sure. I'm not sure about other parts of the state, but it's a way for upstart culinary people to kind of show the community what they have. And the beauty of it is social media, which is how you can find our pop-ups. All we didn't do any advertising. We didn't do anything but post on Instagram and send a send something to a Facebook group, and the rest is history. At this point, we have, you know, generally we sell out at almost every pop-up. Our last like full-scale pop-up that we did, we sold over 100 pastrami sandwiches, or over 100 sandwiches, not all pastrami, over 100 sandwiches in 90 minutes and sold out. So like there's lines 3 hours before we start. If you've ever heard of like Franklin Barbecue, it's very reminiscent of that, where people just line up and wait because, and honestly, I think that's, you know, we have a very loyal following at this point. I think part of it is when we do these pop-ups, we're not doing it every single day. So there's a couple weeks between each pop-up because of, you know, there's just 2 of us at this point. So there's only so much food we can do. And we're trying to build a restaurant. So we got a lot of meetings we're doing and things of that nature. I saw someone ask, why not the food truck route? And honestly, it was finances. For us, we started this business when I got a stimulus check, and we took $1,300 and opened a business account. And that's how we started this thing. You know, fortunately, we've never had to put more money into it. And come here, you want to say goodnight? That's my daughter, Calliope, in her Buzz Lightyear. But yeah, we basically, we just show up wherever people will have us. Oftentimes it's at breweries or establishments that don't have food, that usually would have food trucks. But for us, it just wasn't, I always knew I wanted a restaurant. I'm not huge into the idea of a mobile restaurant. You know, if a tire goes flat, then your whole restaurant goes flat. And so, you know, there's a lot of risk in that. It's a different kind of risk than opening a restaurant, but I like controlling the elements, and in a food truck, it seems very tricky. And honestly, I'm not very adept at driving large vehicles. I drive a Honda. So I don't know that it's the best idea to have me driving around with a bunch of heavy duty equipment, shipping food around all over town. I don't think that's good.
It's totally understandable. It's tough. It's like driving a U-Haul. It's rough.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, who is skilled at that?
A U-Haul filled with gas.
Yes, and food.
Yeah, exactly.
Last question. Your favorite part about this journey with Meshuggah and, you know, where you are right now?
You're looking at it. I mean, I spend more time with my family than I've ever done before. And I mean, that's, to be honest, if you were to do some research into me, you would find that I am very, very, very adamant about helping change the industry that we're in, the hospitality industry, so that people like myself have more opportunities to hang out with little people like this. Because honestly, if you're just going to work every day, working every dinner shift, you know, you miss a lot of really great things. I didn't realize that until outside things kind of made it out of my control, and I ended up home. And once I got home, I knew I didn't want to do anything else. And so in opening a deli, it's not just because I wanted to cook Jewish food. It's because I knew that opening a deli and bakery lended itself to the daytime. So as my kids grow up, they're going to be in school. My wife's going to be at work. I'm not missing these moments that generally when you work in restaurants, you miss. And so we're not only doing that for myself, but we're creating an environment where other parents and other people who want to have families can come and work and cook and do the thing they love. And we can offer them the opportunity to actually be present and be part of their family. You know, you look at holidays, for instance, with doing this Jewish thing, it's kind of cool in that regard too, because for me, holidays like Christmas and Easter are not a part of my lifestyle. So, but I would be at work cooking for hundreds of people. When I grew up, we go to the movies and get Chinese food on Easter and Christmas. So like we have an opportunity to kind of fill a gap and make it so that there's a place where Jewish people can congregate on those holidays where generally there's nothing for us to do except go to the movies and eat Chinese food. So now we hope to create things like that where there's opportunities for Jewish people to congregate. But then, like I said before, like we really want to open it up to everybody. And we really want to, like when we're hiring our staff, have a really diverse staff where we can offer those kind of opportunities to everybody who comes and works with us.
That's awesome. I just want to mention so many messages in the chat of well wishes and thank you for what you're doing, and so happy for you and your family. And just best of luck as you move forward with this journey.
Thank you very much. I will say one thing. I'm going to give you a shameless plug. So as Stacy mentioned at the beginning, we're in the fundraising phase of our building a restaurant. So currently, these things I've been talking about with like the people we're going to hire and the people who are going to work with us, it's a really big part of our business model is taking care of the people who work with us. So in part of doing that, instead of taking on traditional investment, we've decided to do a Kickstarter. So if you go to our Instagram, you go to our website, meshuggah.com, you can access a Kickstarter. We have some really cool things. So even if you live in Raleigh, you can get access to our friends and family, like pre-opening events. You can book a Hanukkah dinner for you and a bunch of your friends, and you guys can all travel over to Charlotte and have a big, a Lux Hanukkah dinner. You can do a multitude of things. We even name a sandwich after you if you pick the right thing to help us out. So even if you don't have the means to contribute anything, you could do to share it with people. You never know who's a person who's got the means to really help us out. We really do think we can do a lot of good with this opportunity. We're going to do everything we can to do that.
So I'm going to put the link to their Kickstarter in the chat so that you have it easily available. Let's see.
Thank you.
All panelists. There we go.
You want to come say goodbye? Calliope said goodbye. She doesn't want to be on camera anymore.
Bye. Rob, thank you so much for this inspiring talk and sharing Jewish heritage and foodways with us. What an incredible journey you've already been on, and we're so excited to see where you head to next.
Thank you so much, Stacy. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk, and we'd love to do it again in the future. I'll have better technology. I'll make sure my team gives me a better PowerPoint presentation next time.
Absolutely. We would love to have you back.
All right.
And thank you to all those of you who joined us this evening. We hope to see you at our next adult program happening next Wednesday, May 19th at noon, History at High Noon, the Colonial Inn in Hillsborough, as part of our Are We There Yet exhibit programming. We hope that you have a wonderful evening, and we will see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.